Hey BookTube, this is Friday Reads. I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks every Friday, usually. Fortunately, it is this Friday. And I have 5 books to tell you about. The first of which is one that I read about 50% of and couldn't take it anymore. And so I skipped to the end. And so because I read more of it than not, I went ahead and rated it. But yeah, it was not a huge success. It was Dear Bridget, I Want You by Penelope Ward. And it was narrated on audio by Zachary Webber and Andy Arndt. Well, the narration sadly couldn't save this book. And the narration was interesting because the main characters are a British doctor and an American nurse with a young son. And she has a big house. She's a widow. He comes to stay there to finish his residency, and he kind of rents a room from her, and the romance goes from there. With regard to the narration, because he's British, Zachary Webber voiced him and did a British accent. Andy Arndt also had to do that British accent when she was voicing the dialogue from this doctor. Well, Andy Arndt, I have to say that I was relatively impressed with, and here's why. She didn't do a British accent, really. You got the very barest hint of a British accent. But see, that tells me, while some people might think, oh, it was terrible, that tells me that she knows that she can't do a great British accent. So she didn't try to do that. She did what she does best, which is narrate in such a way that you got the idea of a British accent, but you didn't get one that was badly done. So huge, huge kudos to her for doing it that way. I think that was really smart, and her narration was fabulous. Zachary Webber, of course, he's one of my favorite narrators, and he did a good British accent, but see, I say that, and I'm an American listening to another American do a British accent. So if I were a Brit, I probably would think it was terrible. But at the same time, I think he pulled it off. I think there were times very subtly I would hear an American accent coming through, or just not quite there. But at the same time, for the most part, I mean, you could definitely tell this character was British. So, you know, I'd say the narration was really good. Unfortunately, the book was not. You had basically very raunchy kind of dialogue and then one sex scene to the next. And no, I'm sorry. I need more of a story than that. And there just wasn't. So, yeah, I think Penelope Ward kind of took a stab at a story, but she just didn't get there. 1 star. Then I picked up Paradox Bound by Peter Clines. This is narrated by Ray Porter, and oh my gosh, Ray Porter was amazing. And it didn't even have so much to do with his expertise in voicing male and female characters or otherwise. You know, I mean, he was just fantastic. And I think it has to do with the phrasing that he puts into his performances, because he says things exactly the way that you hear them in your head. And that embodies these characters with the personalities that ring so true with the way that they're written. So yeah, I loved it. Wonderful narration. The book was so much fun. This is time travel that makes sense, and that doesn't confuse you. It obeys its own rules. And so the main character is a guy who meets the other main character. And he's 7, when he meets this other main character, he's 7 years old. He meets the character again when he's 13, I think, and then again when he's in his 20s. So then he kind of inadvertently becomes a fugitive with this other character. And the bad guys are so good. They're faceless men. They actually have 0 faces. Like, they don't have a face. They can speak, but they have no faces. And they're kind of like FBI agents, kind of, you know, but not. They're just so good. And they're so logical. And that's part of what makes them so good. You know, like, they logically deduce that this is a fugitive and we need to catch this fugitive for these reasons. And so the whole thing centers around the idea that Benjamin Franklin got the Masons together and called on an Egyptian god and turned the American dream into a physical thing that had to be guarded and then vanished. And so now the fugitives are they're kind of like bounty hunters or treasure hunters. It's just these two people on the hunt for this thing. And so it was just, oh, I loved it. 5 stars, really fun, highly recommended. I like Peter Clines. I read something of his, I don't know if it was last year or earlier this year, but he can do sci-fi really well in a very entertaining way that isn't technical, but really entertains you. This would make a great movie. Then I picked up Most Valuable Playboy by Lauren Blakely because I just had not had my fill quite of Zachary Webber's narration. So this was about a football quarterback who was second string for many years, and now he has moved up and he is the guy because the other guy retired. And so it's all about him and his romantic interest and falling in love and all that kind of thing. And so sports romance is one of my favorites. I love football. And so this went about like you'd expect. Zachary Webber was his usual fantastic self. You know, I just really like him. I really like the way he phrases things. I like the way he distinguishes male and female characters. I like the emotion he gives things, how he can communicate the way a guy in his head is much more emotional than the way he speaks or behaves. And I love sports romance. How many times can I say that? I love sports romance. So anyway, I gave this book 3 stars. Then I moved on to Into the Bright Unknown by Ray Carson. This is book 3 in the Gold Seer series and trilogy. And it's narrated by Erin Mallon. And I love Erin Mallon. I think she captured the narration perfectly. This is set in the Old West in the 1800s. And so the accent there is really, I think a person who doesn't know accents might think that it was Southern. And it's really not. It's really much more of a kind of a lazy American accent. I don't know how else to put it. It's just, it's not polished, which I love that. And the language, oh my gosh. The accent plus the language was perfect. She captured it so well. And I just loved it. I think that her range for the guys was not always something that varied one guy to the next, but you always knew who was speaking. And I don't know if it had to do with inflection or what, rather than the pitch, but she just did it really, really well. So very high marks for the narration. The story picks up where the characters left off in the second book, but I have to tell you, the second book ended really nicely. No loose ends, no cliffhangers. You just felt like you left the characters in a really good place. So this book at the first seemed, you know, like unnecessary, like extra, like why would you tack another story on to the end of the second book? But it opened out and it was its own story and it wrapped up at the end, probably a little too conveniently for a lot of people, but not for me because I am a hopeless romantic and I loved it. So in the end, I thought it was wonderful. It had a lot to do with the politics of the Old West and how a town could be run by somebody with a lot of influence and a lot of money, and how people got pushed around and guns were the law, no matter whether you were the law or not using a gun. I mean, if you had a gun, you pretty much were in charge. So really, really good. There's a sting operation at the end that, oh my gosh, just the way it played out. And then the way that it all unfolds and becomes apparent in the very end. You know, everybody talks about what their role was and oh my gosh, it's so good. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars. Then I picked up The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is narrated on audio by Katie Shore. And I did this because Gwen at the Gwendolyn Reading Method said it was almost perfect. And by the way, she's back doing videos again and I'm beyond thrilled because she is so good at being succinct and encapsulating her thoughts so well when she talks about all kinds of books, which she reads all kinds of books. Well, Katie Shore's narration, I had two problems with it, but they were very minor. I have to tell you, very minor. And overall, I think the narration was excellent. Two problems were, first of all, I didn't always know who was speaking or thinking. I think that's a very subtle distinction for a narrator to make, and not every narrator either can do it or I don't know, maybe they think they're doing it and they're like, it doesn't translate or something. I'm not sure, but there were times when I would catch myself thinking, oh, wait a minute, was that in her head or did she say that out loud? Yeah, so that was the only problem I had with her performance. The one other problem I had was with the post-production, and that is that whoever did it did not take out the times when she would catch her breath and swallow. Like, you'd hear that kind of sound, and there is nothing that will yank you more quickly out of the story and into the narration booth than that. So for that reason, I think post-production should have caught that and done something about it. Yeah, it was minor. The story was really fun. It's a hate to love relationship between two executive assistants who are vying for another job that's being created, and it's told from the woman's point of view. Her name is Lucy, and she's convinced that Josh hates her, and she's not real fond of him either. She tends to be really quirky and unorganized, and he is like the picture of neatness and order. And it's just all about their romance, and it's got a lot of facets to it. It was really enjoyable, and I loved it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Currently, I am listening to, because I've kind of, went back and forth from romance to something else, non-romance to romance to non-romance. Right now I'm listening to Peripetia. This is book 2 in the City series by Sarah Lyons Fleming, which is a follow-up series to, or a companion series, really, because it's happening at the same time as the other series, to Until the End of the World. Sarah Lyons Fleming is a highly underrated author. The woman writes amazing stories, and I wish more people knew about her because she's just really good, really good. This is all about zombies, so right there you go. It's the brother of the main character from the first series, and another person, another female character, are the main people that you follow. It's narrated from 2 points of view by Therese Plummer and Luke Daniels, and the narration is fabulous, just spectacular. These two are very seasoned narrators, very good at what they do, because they do a lot of stuff, and I've just always been impressed with them, and I'm impressed again. So this is a long book. It's 19 hours, so I don't even know if I'm halfway through yet. I have 14 hours to go, so out of 19, so I don't think I'm quite halfway yet. And when I pick up my iPad, I have been picking up The Staff and the Blade by Elizabeth Hunter. And this follows 2 more characters from her Irin Chronicles. And some of it is history, some of it happens at the same time as stuff that happened in the Irin Chronicles. And it's just wonderful. I love being back in that world. My only complaint is that it's not on audio. So when I finish with that, I will probably move on to The Silent, which is book 5 in that series. I'm really looking forward to it. Although I may wait until that's out on audio, because this is more like a collection of novellas, and that next book is another story following different characters. Last thing I have to tell you is that I ordered some books because there is a book festival coming up on the 28th of October, and it's called Books by the Banks, or Books on the Banks. It's in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's not very far from where I live. And so one of the authors that's going to be there is Emily Henry, and I love Emily Henry. I loved her books, and so because of that, I ordered them. This is The Love That Split the World and A Million Junes. A Million Junes this year was one of my top 5 books of all of the year. This is an incredibly good YA book that has to do with magical realism. If you have not read it, then and you like YA, you should read this, YA Contemporary. So I'm going to get those signed, and I'm really excited about that. There are some other authors there, a lot of YA authors, I think, that are relatively unknown or not widely known, and a few that I am really looking forward to having some other books signed. Mindy McGinnis is one. I have Not a Drop to Drink by her to have signed, and Lauren Oliver is going to be there, and I have a first edition copy of Delirium, so looking forward to that. So that's it for my weekend. Let me know what you're reading this weekend, and that's it for now for me. I'm gonna go enjoy some more October sunshine and warm weather, and I will see you next time. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.